What is Sass? And what is less? And is Sass less than less? Or is less less than Sass? Well, let's try to find out. First of all, when you see in this series of videos, when you see a sign looks like this, where it says try in the lower right corner, then do pause the video and try to do what the slide says. Because then you will learn much more than just looking through all of this. So when you see something like this, pause the video and do the exercise. And if it is the last slide in one video, well, then I will start the next video by doing the exercise. So let's continue. What is Sass and Less? Well, both syntactically awesome style sheet and linear CSS, well, they extend what you can do in pure vanilla CSS. So they kind of it's a superset of what CSS is. And the ID, you can start thinking about why should we use Sass or Less? Well, the idea is that you can write code that is easier to update, easier to handle. You write less code and it's more object-oriented. And in the end, I think it's more fun to write. And how do they work? Well, both Sass and Less, they are CSS preprocessors, because in the end, the browser can only understand pure CSS. So that means that the less code, all the Sass code needs to be transcoded or transpiled into some pure vanilla CSS code. They work in the same way. You have your Sass or Less code, you do the recompilation of the code, so to speak, and then in the end you have pure vanilla CSS code. Less is written in JavaScript in the main version. That means that you can actually send less code to the browser, but then you of course need the less library to kind of transcode it into pure CSS. But we usually don't do that, because why? Well, because it takes some time. And if you have huge less files, well, then it might actually take some time. So we need to, we usually do it in one step before we actually send the code to the browser. Sass, on the other hand, is the main version is written in Ruby, so that means that you need to do it beforehand. There is at the moment a Sass JavaScript library also, so if you really want, you can use that in the browser also. But the idea is that you have your code, you recompile that into pure CSS code. And how can you use that? Well, you can use it in many different ways. And if you download Sass or if you download Less, well, then there are instructions on how to set that one up. So you don't need anything extra. But in my opinion, I think to get started, I think it's a lot easier to use an application that handles kind of everything for you. And one of them that I will use in these videos is an application called Prepros. And that is kind of semi-free. It is free for personal use. You get a nag screen from now and then that says that maybe you would like to buy this one. And if you start to use this one, you soon realize that, okay, paying the price is a cheap price to pay for what you get. There is other alternatives. My personal favorite that I use a lot is CodeKit. That is macOS only, but it's kind of like Prepros on steroids. The later versions of Prepros have kind of closed in the gap a little bit, but in my opinion, CodeKit is kind of the black voodoo magic box. There is another app that is called Koala app that you can use, or you can of course set up a build system using Grunt or whatever, and then use that one. So before you continue with the next video, go ahead and go to prepros.io and download and install the Prepros app.